the purpose of this forum is to have a conversation with you about quantum as the newest technology coming into really the world, into the country. And Matt and I have been working together for about 2 years to make it the leading technology for Palm Beach County and also for the state of Florida. So if we've not had the chance to meet, I'm Kelly Smallridge. I lead the Economic Development Board for Palm Beach County. Tanya. I lead the Economic Development Board for Palm Beach County, and our role is to recruit, retain, and expand industry to this area. We are also the creators of Wall Street South. And I give you that background because we've led that for 10 years. And about 2 years ago, Matt Cimaglia walked into my office and said, have you ever thought about quantum? And I didn't even know what quantum was. But what I did know is that as the Economic Development Board, we needed to be forward thinking. And we needed to wrap our arms around a technology that was going to lead us into the next era of being ultra competitive in order to create the infrastructure that was necessary to lead. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to give his background and history, and then we're going to dive deep into where we're going with this industry.
Yeah, so as we were joking about just prior to the panel is the fact that I'm not just some person from an outsider's perspective that decided it's beautiful here, I want to move here. I'm actually born and raised in Palm Beach County. I grew up in Boca. For me, I grew up during an era where IBM was at its peak. The PC was released the same year that I was born, and I was just part of that ecosystem. And I saw that impact that it had on the community, and I thought, what a great way of bringing that back to South Florida, particularly West Palm, where I live now. And I had been following quantum for about 7 years, and it was right after an exit that I had from a previous company, and it was that paradigm shift that I think that we needed in technology. So I had been following technology forever, and everything was good, but I wouldn't say it was great. And there wasn't anything that wasn't expected. And when I started reading about quantum, it was something that I truly was taken aback by and thought, wow, like this is something as revolutionary as the internet. So a lot of people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis don't really know what quantum is, and by the way, that's totally fair. And when I started really doing deep dive research on it, there was a number of areas that was lacking in the ecosystem, but essentially, that's what I'm trying to solve. But I think that we're going to get into that in a little bit.
So, given that there are a lot of local leaders here, let's paint the picture of what we've accomplished together based upon our conversation 2 years ago. Let's shift over to where we started in kicking off the initial conversation so that everybody could be aware of what quantum was. We held a conference in October of 2025. Talk a little bit about the foundation that we laid and touch on what quantum is to start.
Yeah, and I think that even before that, what was incredible was the way that the BDB was able to pull together select groups, whether it was a group of educators or a group of hospitals or a group of people in the defense arena. We had these round tables and started educating. And to answer your question on what is quantum, it's more about a higher speed of doing things. If only quantum could figure out a way of eliminating sound from a panel right next to us, we're working on that, but we're not quite at that spectrum yet. So quantum essentially follows a bunch of different areas. The biggest that I think that we all have to really think about today is security. So if I'm able to essentially decrypt something in 2 years from now, which has been publicly spoken about, that's scary because that means that any of our banking data, any of our medical data, any of our top secret information from a government perspective, all of that potentially could be unlocked in about 2 years from now via a quantum computer in essentially seconds. So when we start to think about the fact that we know China and other adversaries are doing something called harvesting data today. We know that, that's fact. They have this harvest now, decrypt later aspect of things where they know that one day they will be able to decrypt this information. But outside of quantum computing, there's a number of amazing areas, and my favorite is quantum sensing. So right now, if you and I were flying over Ukraine or even over the Middle East, we would not be able to use GPS. So there's a lot of spoofing or a lot of jamming that's happening, whether you're on a commercial flight or even a military flight. But using quantum sensing, what's been really incredible in terms of the advances is the fact that you're able to use the Earth's magnetic field, which is essentially a fingerprint. So no matter where we are, there's a unique signature. And they've layered on navigation data on top of that, meaning you no longer need satellites to figure out exactly where you are. And that's really incredible because now you can do autonomous vehicles underwater that don't have any kind of satellite infrastructure, or mining applications. And again, even for commercial or defense side of things, you'll know exactly where you are based on this unique signature property. So quantum has a million different advances. The thing that quantum won't do is replace your computer or your iPhone. You won't ever do 2 plus 2 on a quantum computer. It's silly, it's not really optimized for that. But if you look at this progression that we've had over the last couple of years, where I'm sure you've all heard the term GPU, NVIDIA is very famous for creating GPUs. A lot of people refer to quantum computers as QPUs. So it's just an additional element on top of a classical network that already exists. So your computer today that you would use will then tap into a quantum computer to do really incredible calculations that are incapable of happening today on any kind of standard supercomputer that we have.
So my guess is that the vast majority of the audience here doesn't know a CPU from a GPU and a quantum bit from a quantum sensor. So one of the things that I asked Matt to do when he was trying to get me to bite into taking this initiative on was I said, Matt, bring it down to a third grade level for me. And Matt said something like, I'll give you two scenarios. If you have 3,000 keys on a ring, you will be able to, in milliseconds, figure out what key out of the 3,000 opens that door. Or if you are a rat in a maze, in a millisecond, you'll be able to get out of that maze. And the reason why we wanted to take it on for Palm Beach County is because we knew we had the applicable sectors that we could marry quantum and bring the most advanced technology to advance what we've been growing here, whether it be the Wall Street South initiative. We put them in front of life science companies. We put quantum in front of hospitals. We took them to the port, the airport, logistics, distribution, and the school district. Let's slide into, before we talk about the conference and what we were able to accomplish, talk a little bit about the conversation with the Dreyfus School, and then add on top of that so everyone can see how quickly we've moved. Tell everybody what we're doing with Palm Beach State College, and then we'll move into FAU.
Yeah, so what's really exciting about Dreyfus School is they started this year, a actual quantum club, which next year they intend to bring into Palm Beach County as a full quantum curriculum. And to kind of echo what Kelly was saying, quantum will touch every industry, period. So there's not an industry that quantum won't touch. Again, it's almost like saying today, what industries does the internet touch, right? It's kind of a joke. The other thing is, with Palm Beach State College, and again, 2 years to today, we now have a quantum center that's being established at Palm Beach State College, West Palm Beach campus, so right across the street, where in a 10,000 square foot space, we're going to be able to incubate businesses locally to then grow and then spread into our communities. And we're also going to be able to educate the workforce. So a lot of people keep thinking, oh, quantum, I need to be a PhD, or it needs to be advanced level, doctorate programs. No, we need a workforce. We need the worker bees that are going to go out there and service these systems. Who's going to weld them together? Who's going to lay the fiber? Who's going to make sure that the air conditioning is working at 3 o'clock in the morning? So these are all really important elements to the quantum ecosystem. And candidly, by Palm Beach County putting a huge step forward in this initiative, we're going to not only breed jobs here, but we're also going to keep that brain trust here.
So in the middle of us taking on quantum and then establishing the center, talking to Dreyfus School, we get a prospect. That is the largest gate annealing quantum computing system out of California. And Matt and I worked on recruiting them. And we spent, 6 months, 4 months, putting together a City of Boca Raton, thank you, Councilmember Drucker, for the incentive, and work with the state as well. And Matt will tell you that that we showed them the entire county, and the goal was to land this in order to take us from like ground zero to a much higher level on a national scale and wake up the United States that we were so serious. So we thought if we could land this company, that it would be the biggest win, and the name of the company is D-Wave. So tell them that process.
And the unique thing about that too is there are very few quantum companies out there. There's maybe a half a dozen to a dozen actual quantum companies. In addition to that, you don't have to think about quantum computers as a quantity play. So D-Wave, for instance, there might only be about a dozen or so computers that D-Wave has ever built, period. So the notion that it has to be an NVIDIA type system where you're pumping out millions of chips a year, no, it's actually the inverse of that. These guys are able to do things so efficiently. And the best part about it too, from a data center perspective, is the dirty word in Florida is data center, right? And what I really kind of think about is the fact that in some senses I sort of agree with it, because by using a quantum computer, it's essentially the same as plugging it into a wall outlet. You don't need any kind of crazy special electricity. Yes, it needs to be clean and everything, but it's almost the equivalent of like 10 hair dryers of the draw of usage that a quantum computer uses, and its output far surpasses a mega data center. So that's kind of a realistic probability that we're talking about now when it comes to the efficiencies of quantum computing.
Okay, so then we land D-Wave in the Boca Raton Innovation Center, 32,000 square feet, 100 employees, about a $25 million capital investment. And as part of that courting process, we bring in FAU President Adam Hasner as part of our A-team to help sell D-Wave on landing in Boca Raton. Now tell everybody what Florida Atlantic University's president did to put the icing on the cake to really solidify D-Wave and their interest here in this county, and what that means in terms of the county having a competitive edge in this industry.
Yeah, so what I said about there's very few quantum computers out there, D-Wave actually sold a system to FAU. So FAU will actually house the first quantum computer in the state of Florida on their campus. And what's incredible about that is, think about, again, keeping jobs, keeping people, keeping talent here locally, because candidly, it's a great place to live. But on top of that, if you now are used to an ecosystem where you have access to a quantum computer, because they're so oversubscribed, you will almost have a fast pass lane into having access to a quantum computer, where if you were trying to have access to it on a cloud system, you would actually be waiting in line to go and process your information.
So we put together Palm Beach State College, we put together Florida Atlantic University, and then Matt and I just came back from Nashville last week, where we are forming an alliance with Vanderbilt University. And when Vanderbilt establishes their 300,000 square foot facility right down the street from here, they will also be involved in this whole quantum workforce preparation. Knowing that we had those 3 or 4 wins under our belt, we then went public and we held a conference in October of 2025, and we had many, many big players there. And we announced many of these initiatives, but we also, while all of that was going on, we did something even bigger. We went and started talking to 14 to 16 university presidents, and they signed something called FAQT. So can you talk a little bit about what we did with all the college university presidents and what that means for this county?
So the Florida Alliance for Quantum Technologies was really a tremendous initiative. Honestly, all of the schools were shocked that we even got it accomplished. What it essentially is doing is they now have an alliance that they're going to share resources, both monetarily and physically. So any of the hardware that these schools have, but also talent. So any of the teachers will now be able to seamlessly cross-blend between any of the universities that are part of this initiative. And also it's really great from the state's perspective, because instead of all of the schools coming to the state with the same ask, and then the state saying, sorry, we can't give it to one school because the other school is going to be mad at us if we don't, The initiative essentially is asking one time for a resource. There's a few announcements that might be coming out in the next couple of weeks about this that'll be very, very compelling from the state's perspective. But again, I think that what it really comes down to is coordinated efforts. And as you mentioned with Vanderbilt, this very much so is a regional play. This isn't Silicon Valley anymore. This isn't everything happening in one location. There are these nodes that are happening throughout the United States, whether it's Florida, Maryland, Tennessee, New Mexico, Arizona, Montana. All of these different corridors are popping up, and what's really great about that is there's unique perspectives that happen when you're in these different regions. So Phoenix, for instance, I'm doing some work with them right now. They're huge on the semiconductor side. So if they're able to supply the chips for companies that we're potentially breeding here in South Florida, that's a win-win for everyone. And so that's a lot of this initiative. And I think, candidly, going back to all of this, when you start to look at the fact that there's such a lack of quantum talent out there, we really are kind of behind the ball right now. So we need to do anything that we can as aggressively as possible to go build out these workforces and go push this forward with various initiatives, whether it's at the city level, the county level, or the state level.
And when we were working with the university presidents and the universities, one of the things that we learned, like the University of Florida, and I love University of Florida, of course, and Florida State and UCF and USF, is that the difference here in this county is we were focused on the commercialization. We were focused on bringing in the private company and laying the groundwork for commercial companies to come here, not just doing research within FAU. And that's how we were able to bring in D-Wave.
Yeah, and the great thing about quantum, we have hit this phase of commercialization now. It is a product. It is something that's being sold. There are apps being developed. There are sensors that are being sold. So there's a company that we're looking at investing in right now that already has a NASA contract for quantum sensors that they're going to put in space and on space stations. So it's very much so grown out of the lab scenario now, and we're now into commercialization and selling this as a true product. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Should we do a quick question or two before we?
Yes, go ahead.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Tanya.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Florida Alliance for Quantum Technologies.
It basically is all the public universities. Not one stepped out. They all agreed to sign it.
Where did this start? Is that anywhere in the world, or
Where did quantum start?
It's about 100 years ago, quantum technologies really started taking shape. So very theoretical. So this is not something new. Even Einstein had trouble understanding how it actually worked. So he's very public about saying in papers, I really don't understand how this works, but I know it works, theoretically, right? So he was able to do the math behind it. Fast forward, it wasn't until this era that we live in today that we could actually start proving out some of the theory, and it works. And that's the incredible thing about it. Again, this is not some new concept. It's been around for 100 years. In fact, last year was the year of quantum science and technology celebrating 100 years.
You're going to see it everywhere now.
give us a few concrete use cases for quantum, make this real for us, but also tell us what are some of the pitfalls that you might see in rolling this out?
Yeah, so I recommend to everyone on every panel that I ever go to, IBM Quantum Decade. So if you get through sort of the propaganda of IBM, great company, but they're very leaned into it. But they do a really great job. Again, just Google IBM Quantum Decade. It's an ebook. It's about 100 pages. The last 25% of it outlines practical applications for quantum. The whole book was written for us. I mean, it was not written for a physicist to digest deep technical information. It was written for sort of a more of a mainstream audience. But again, the last 25% of it, anything from logistics to personalized medicine to again, going back to sensing, anything that you could imagine, portfolio optimization for financial firms, things like that. The pitfalls, candidly, are going to be there's no second place in quantum. So we can't be second place, and we have to be number one. And so that, I think, is the scariest component of this, is that if we don't do as much as we possibly can by putting private funding into quantum, talking to our legislators to put as much of the government capital behind this. There was a authorization meeting today in DC about the National Quantum Initiative Act. This was signed over 5 years ago. It's been lapsed for 2 years. There's now been a council about it today, and there's a bipartisan agreement that this needs to be moving forward for national security. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening, and as Kelly mentioned, you are now all, unfortunately, going to hear about quantum all the time, and you're going to be able to understand it in TV shows when they make references to it. And it's such an incredible era that we live in, that I think that within 10 years or so, we're going to be talking about personalized medicine. We're going to be talking about going to your urgent care center, doing some sort of diagnostic, and then by the time they say, great, you're going to go over to CVS and pick up your medicine, it will have done 14 billion drug trials, and it's a medicine based on your DNA specifically, where only you can take it, and it's going to cure whatever you have and then some. That's what I'm sort of speculating on and hoping for, but I think that we're not too far away. I unfortunately do have to catch a flight.
And don't ask me any questions about quantum, but I'll answer everything else.
So I'm pretty available through the BDB. So reach out to the BDB if you want to get a hold of me. And my website is Quantum Coast Capital. So you can find me on Quantum Coast Capital. So thank you all for your time today. Really appreciate it.